Save me, take me with you. For Apache widow pleads to a lone cuman, but he took all of them. The sun was already low in the sky when the wind began to change. It no longer carried the warm smell of dry grass and distant water. Instead, it brought dust and a strange, heavy silence that felt like a warning. In the small Apache settlement near the wide valley, life slowed as if the land itself was holding its breath. Four women stood near the edge of the camp, their eyes fixed on the far horizon. They had been there since the morning, watching the same empty trail that curved between the hills. Their husbands had left before sunrise, riding out to hunt and trade. It was not the first time they had gone, and it should not have been dangerous. Still, something in the air felt wrong. The first woman, Taya, held her shawl close around her shoulders even though the day was warm. She was the youngest of the four, and her face still carried the softness of someone who had not yet learned how hard the world could be. Her eyes, dark and wide, searched the land again and again, as if she believed that by looking hard enough she could make her husband appear. Beside her stood Nira, taller and quieter. She had always been calm, even when others worried. Her hands were folded in front of her, but her fingers twisted together slowly, showing the fear she tried to hide. She had lost her parents when she was young, and the thought of losing her husband, too, felt like losing her last safe place in the world. The third woman, Mara, leaned against a wooden post near one of the shelters. She had a sharp face and a voice that often carried across the camp when she spoke. But now she said nothing. Her jaw was tight and her eyes were narrowed toward the trail. She did not believe in waiting for good news. She believed in preparing for the worst. The last woman, Ina, sat on a low rock with her hands resting on her knees. She was the oldest of the four, and her movements were slower, more careful. She had seen loss before. She had seen seasons of hunger, sickness, and storms that took homes and lives. Still, this waiting felt heavier than anything she remembered. Around them, the camp tried to carry on. Children played near the shelters, chasing each other and laughing. Older people tended to small fires or worked with tools made of bone and stone. But even they glanced toward the horizon now and then. Everyone knew who was missing. Everyone felt the quiet worry spreading like a shadow. As the sun dipped lower, the light turned gold and red. Long shadows stretched across the ground. Taya took a step forward, then stopped. Her heart jumped at every movement in the distance, a bird lifting from the grass, a branch swaying in the wind. Each time, hope rose only to fall again. "They should be back by now," she whispered. Mara pushed herself off the post and stood straight. "They should," she agreed, "and they are not." Nira looked between them. "Maybe they found more work, maybe they stopped to trade." Ina sighed softly. "Or maybe the land did not welcome them today." No one replied to that. Then far down the trail, something moved. It was not fast or smooth like a group of riders. It was slow, uneven. Taya's breath caught in her throat. "Someone is coming," she said, louder now. All four women stepped forward. The children nearby fell quiet, sensing the change. The shape in the distance grew clearer. It was a single rider on a tired horse. His shoulders were slumped and his head was bowed as if he was carrying more than just his own weight. Mara's hand tightened into a fist. "Only one," she said. The rider came closer, and they could see that he was not from their people. His clothing was different, worn and dusty. His hair was dark and tied back, and his face was marked by long days under the sun and wind. He looked around as he approached, alert and careful, like someone who did not trust the land he was walking into. The horse slowed to a stop a short distance from the camp. The man did not get down right away. He studied the people watching him, his eyes moving from face to face. When he saw the four women standing together, something in his expression changed. It was not kindness or fear, but something closer to understanding. Ina took a step forward. Her voice was steady. "You ride alone. Where are the men who came this way this morning?" The man took a moment before answering. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough, like he did not use it often. "They are gone." Taya felt the ground shift under her feet. "Gone where?" she asked. The man looked away toward the hills. "The land took them." Silence fell over the camp. Even the wind seemed to stop. Nira shook her head slowly. "You are saying they are dead?" The man did not say the word. He only nodded once. Taya's knees went weak, and she would have fallen if Mara had not reached out and grabbed her arm. A sound rose in Taya's chest, something between a cry and a breath, but it never fully came out. Ina closed her eyes for a moment, as if offering a quiet goodbye to the men she had known. Mara stared at the rider. "How do we know you speak the truth?" The man met her gaze. Because I have no reason to lie to women who have already lost everything. The weight of his words settled over them. The camp began to stir, people whispered, some stepped closer. The world they knew had just changed, and everyone felt it. The man swung his leg over the horse and stood on the ground. He winced slightly, as if moving hurt. He reached into a small bag tied to the saddle and pulled out a simple item, a carved piece of wood, a small tool, something that clearly belonged to someone else. He held it out to Ina. "They carried this," he said. "One of them." Ina took it with shaking hands. She recognized it at once. It had been made by Neera's husband, something he always kept close. Neera covered her mouth and tears filled her eyes. The truth was no longer something they could avoid. The sun sank behind the hills and the sky darkened. Fires were lit around the camp, their soft light flickering across faces filled with shock and grief. The man stayed near the edge, not joining anyone, not leaving either. He sat on a rock, his eyes on the ground like he was carrying his own memories. Taya found herself looking at him. He was a stranger, but he was also the last person who had seen her husband alive. That made him both a comfort and a pain. Mara walked over to him. "You can leave in the morning," she said. "You have done what you came to do." The man looked up. "I did not come to do this," he replied. "I only passed through." Neera joined them, her voice soft. "Passing through where?" He hesitated. "North, to a place where the land is calmer, where people trade instead of fight." Ina stepped closer. "Is it safe?" He thought about it. Nothing is fully safe, but it is safer than here for those who stand alone. The four women exchanged glances. The words "stand alone" echoed in their minds. They knew what they were now, without husbands, without protectors, without a clear future. As night fell fully, the stars came out, bright and cold above them. Taya sat by a small fire, staring into the flames. The world she had known that morning was gone. In its place was a wide, dark path she could not yet see. Somewhere nearby, the lone rider prepared to sleep. He did not know it yet, but his path and the paths of four grieving women were about to cross in a way none of them had planned. The land was quiet again, but this time it was not peaceful. It was waiting. The night did not bring rest. Even as the camp grew quiet, sleep stayed far away from the four women. The fire burned low, its soft light moving across their faces as the wind whispered through the grass. Each sound felt louder than it should have been, each shadow deeper and more alive. Taya lay on a thin blanket near the fire, staring up at the stars. They looked the same as they always had, bright and distant, uncaring. She wondered how the world could keep going as if nothing had changed when her own world had broken apart in a single day. Her chest felt tight, and every breath reminded her of the man who would never sit beside her again. Neera sat nearby with her knees pulled close to her chest. She held the small carved piece of wood in her hands, turning it over and over. Her husband's hands had shaped it, smoothing its edges, carving its lines. Now it was all she had left of him. The thought made her heart ache in a way she could not explain. Mara stood a little away from the fire, looking out into the darkness. She did not trust the night. She did not trust the quiet. Her mind kept racing, thinking of all the dangers that could be hiding beyond the reach of the light. She felt anger rising inside her, not just at what had happened, but at how powerless they now were. Ina sat on a flat stone, her back straight despite the tiredness in her body. She watched the others, her eyes gentle but filled with worry. She had lived long enough to know that grief was only the first step. What came after was often harder. Across the camp, the lone rider lay near his horse, using his rolled-up cloak as a pillow. He did not sleep either. His eyes were open, fixed on the sky. He thought of the road ahead, of the land he planned to cross, of the people who might welcome him or turn him away. He had not planned to stop here. He had not planned to be the bearer of such heavy news. At some point, Taya sat up. She hugged her arms around herself and looked toward the man. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she stood and walked slowly across the camp, her footsteps soft on the ground. He noticed her before she spoke. "You should be resting," he said quietly. "So should you," she replied. She sat on a rock a short distance away. They were silent for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant call of a night bird. "You were with them," she finally said. "My husband, you were there when they died." The man nodded. "Yes." "Did they suffer?" Her voice shook as she asked. He thought carefully before answering. "They fought, they did not run." Taya closed her eyes. Somehow that helped. She wanted to believe her husband had been brave to the end. Myra watched them from a distance, her eyes sharp. She did not like how close Taya was sitting to a stranger. She walked over and stood beside her. "You said the land to the north is safer," Mara said to the man. "What makes you so sure?" "I have been there before," he replied. "There are traders, people from many places. Not everyone is kind, but not everyone is looking to take from you either." Ina joined them, moving slowly but with purpose. "How far is it?" "Many days on foot," he said. "Fewer on a horse, but the path is not easy." Nira stood behind Ina, listening closely. "We cannot stay here," she said softly. "Everyone knows what has happened. They will know we are alone." The man looked at her. "You are right. This place will grow dangerous for you." Mara crossed her arms. "So what do you suggest? That we follow you like lost children?" He met her gaze without anger. "I suggest you decide what you want. I am only walking my own road." Ina took a deep breath. "Sometimes walking the same road is better than walking alone." The words hung in the air. The night passed slowly. When the first light of morning touched the sky, the camp began to wake. People moved quietly, their faces still heavy with the news from the day before. Some looked at the four women with pity. Others looked away, unsure of what to say. Taya, Nira, Mara, and Ina gathered near one of the shelters. They spoke in low voices, their heads closed together. "We cannot stay," Nira said. "I do not feel safe here anymore." Mara nodded. "I agree. This place is no longer home." Taya looked down at her hands. "Where would we go?" Ina looked toward the lone rider who was tightening the straps on his horse. "North," she said, "toward the land he spoke of." Mara frowned. "And trust a man we do not know?" Ina's eyes were calm. "We already trust him with the truth of what happened." "Sometimes trust starts there," Taya swallowed. "I do not want to be alone," she said. "Not anymore." The decision was not spoken out loud, but it was made. They walked over to the man as he finished preparing to leave. He looked at them, surprised. "You are still here," he said. "We are coming with you," Mara said, her voice firm. He raised an eyebrow. "All of you?" "Yes," Ina replied, "if you will allow it." He looked at each of them in turn. He saw fear in Taya's eyes, quiet strength in Nira's, fire in Mara's, and steady resolve in Ina's. He sighed. "This will not be easy," he said. "I cannot promise safety. I cannot promise comfort." "We do not ask for comfort," Nira said. "Only a chance." He nodded slowly. "Then gather what you need. We leave soon." The women moved quickly. They packed small bundles of food, water skins, and simple belongings. Each item they chose felt like a piece of their old life, something they were either taking with them or leaving behind forever. When they were ready, they stood at the edge of the camp. No one stopped them. A few people watched in silence. The four women did not look back. The road stretched out in front of them, wide and empty. The sun was rising now, painting the sky with soft colors. It felt like the start of something new, even if they did not know what that something would be. They walked behind the man as he led the way, his horse moving slowly to match their pace. The land around them was open and quiet. Grass waved in the wind, birds flew overhead. After a while, Taya spoke. "What is your name?" He glanced back. "Karan," he said. "I am Taya," she replied. "This is Nira, Mara, and Ina." He nodded, acknowledging each name. The day grew warmer as they walked. Their feet grew tired. Their mouths grew dry, but they kept moving, step by step, leaving the past behind them with every footfall. As the sun climbed higher, Karan looked ahead, his eyes narrowing. "We will need to be careful," he said. "Of what?" Mara asked. "Of people who see travelers as easy targets," he replied. The women exchanged uneasy looks. They walked on in silence after that, the weight of his words settling in their minds. The road was not just a path to a new place. It was a test, a challenge, a line between who they had been and who they would become. Behind them, the camp faded into the distance. Ahead of them, the unknown waited. And none of them knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change them in ways they could not yet imagine. The road grew narrower as the land began to change. The wide open fields slowly turned into rocky ground, and small hills rose like quiet guards on both sides of the path. The sun moved high in the sky, and its heat pressed down on the group as they walked. Every step felt heavier than the last, but none of them spoke of stopping. Karan walked in front, his eyes always scanning the land ahead. He moved with the calm focus of someone who had traveled many roads before. His horse followed close behind him, carrying a small bundle tied to its side. From time to time, he slowed his pace so the women could keep up. Taya struggled the most. Her legs ached and her breathing grew shallow. Still, she refused to fall behind. Each step felt like a promise she was making to herself, a promise that she would not let her life end with loss and fear. Nira walked beside her, offering quiet support. Sometimes she handed Taya a drink of water. Other times she simply walked close enough for their shoulders to brush. The small contact reminded them both that they were not alone. Myra stayed a little behind, her eyes always moving. She watched the hills, the rocks, the shadows. Her body was tired, but her mind was sharp. She did not trust the quiet. She believed that danger often came when people felt most at ease. Ina walked at the back, steady and slow. She focused on her breathing, on the sound of her feet touching the ground. She thought of the many paths she had walked in her life, and how each one had led her somewhere she had not expected. This path, she felt, was no different. As the day went on, the sky began to change. Soft clouds gathered, and a cool breeze moved through the air. It felt like a small gift from the land, easing their tired bodies. Karan stopped near a group of tall rocks. "We should rest here," he said. "The ground ahead is harder to cross." They sat down in the shade, grateful for the break. Taya leaned back against a rock, closing her eyes. Nira unpacked a small piece of dried food and shared it with the others. Myra watched Karan as he checked the straps on his horse. "You do this often," she said. "Travel with people who are not like you?" He paused. "Sometimes." "Why?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Because the road is long, and it is easier when you do not walk it alone." Ina smiled softly. "That is a wise answer." As they rested, Taya noticed something in the distance, a thin line of dark green near the base of a hill. "Is that water?" she asked. Karan followed her gaze. "Yes, a small stream. We can refill our skins there." The thought of fresh water gave them new energy. They stood and continued walking, their steps quicker now. When they reached the stream, the sound of flowing water felt like music. They knelt down, drinking carefully and filling their containers. The water was cool and clear. For a moment the world felt peaceful. Then a sound broke the quiet. It was not loud, but it was different from the wind or the water. It was the sound of movement. Mara stood up quickly. "Someone is there," she said. Karan's hand went up, signaling everyone to stay still. He looked toward the trees near the stream. The leaves shifted slightly. A young boy stepped out. He looked thin and tired, his clothes worn and dusty. His eyes were wide as he stared at them. Taya's heart softened at the sight of him. "He is just a child," she said. Karan lowered his hand and took a slow step forward. "Who are you?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated. "My name is Liko," he said. "I am lost." Ina moved closer, her voice kind. "Where is your family?" Liko shook his head. "I do not know. We were traveling and I fell behind. When I looked up, they were gone." Nira knelt down in front of him. "How long have you been alone?" "Since yesterday," he replied. The women exchanged looks. They knew what it felt like to be suddenly alone in a world that did not care. Karan sighed. "The road is not kind to those who walk it alone," he said. Myra crossed her arms. "Are you saying we should take him with us too?" Ina placed a hand on Mara's arm. "We cannot leave him here." Mara looked at the boy's tired face and said nothing more. Liko walked with them as they continued their journey. He stayed close to Ina, who offered him water and small pieces of food. Slowly, color returned to his face. As the afternoon turned to evening, the land opened up again. They found a small, flat area surrounded by low hills and decided to stop for the night. Karan helped start a fire and the women gathered dry branches. The flames rose, casting warm light around them. Liko sat near Taya, listening as Nira and Ina spoke softly about the stars and the way people used to follow them to find their way. His eyes shone with wonder. Myra sat across from Karan. "You did not have to let him come with us," she said. "No," Karan replied, "but I chose to." "Why?" she pressed. He looked into the fire. "Because once someone did the same for me." The words surprised her. She studied him in a new way, seeing not just a traveler, but someone who carried his own story of being lost and found. That night, as everyone settled down to sleep, Taya lay awake, staring at the flames as they slowly faded into glowing embers. She thought about how much had changed in just a few days. She had lost her past, but somehow she was beginning to build something new. Nira held the carved piece of wood close to her chest, whispering a quiet goodbye to the man she loved. But for the first time, she also whispered a small hello to the future. Myra stared up at the sky, her anger slowly giving way to something else. Not hope, exactly, but the idea that maybe the world still had a place for her. Ina watched them all, including the sleeping boy and the quiet traveler. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. This group, brought together by loss and chance, was becoming something like a family. Karan sat a little apart, keeping watch. He looked at the faces around the fire and realized that his journey had changed. It was no longer just about reaching a place. It was about protecting the people who now walked beside him. The night passed quietly, the stars moving slowly across the sky. And as the first light of dawn touched the land, each of them felt it. They were no longer just survivors of what they had lost. They were becoming something more. They were becoming a group bound by choice, by shared steps on a long and uncertain road. And whatever waited ahead, they would face it together. Morning came quietly, like it did not want to disturb the small group sleeping near the dying fire. The sky was pale and soft, painted with light colors that slowly grew brighter. A cool breeze moved through the grass, carrying the smell of earth and water. It felt like a new beginning, but the road ahead still held many unknowns. Karan was the first to stand. He stretched his arms and looked around, checking the land the way he always did. Nothing moved except a few birds in the distance. The others slowly woke, one by one, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Taya sat up and looked at the boy, Liko, who was still curled up on his side, breathing softly. For a moment, she smiled. Seeing him there made her feel like she had something to protect, something that gave her purpose again. Neera began to gather their small belongings, folding blankets and tying up food bundles. Ina helped her, moving carefully but with steady hands. Mara walked a short distance away, scanning the hills like she did every morning. She trusted her instincts more than anything, and today they told her to be alert. They ate a small breakfast of dried food and water. It was not much, but it gave them enough strength to keep moving. When they were ready, they set out again, the road stretching long and quiet before them. The land slowly changed as they walked. The ground became rougher, covered in stones and patches of dry earth. Tall grass gave way to low bushes and scattered trees. The path was harder to follow now, and Karan had to stop often to look for signs of where to go. Liko walked beside Ina, asking questions about everything he saw. "Why do the rocks look like that? Where do the birds go at night?" Ina answered him with patience, her voice gentle and calm. The boy listened closely, as if each word was a small treasure. Taya and Neera walked together, their steps falling into a steady rhythm. Sometimes they spoke about their past lives, about the small things they missed, the sound of laughter from their homes, the warmth of hands that would never hold theirs again. Talking about it still hurt, but it also felt like a way to keep those memories alive. Mara walked a little ahead now, beside Karan. She did not speak much, but she paid close attention to everything he did. The way he looked at the land, the way he listened to the wind. She began to understand that his quiet nature was not coldness, but focus. As the sun climbed higher, the heat grew stronger. Their steps slowed and their mouths grew dry. Karan pointed toward a group of trees in the distance. "There should be shade there," he said. They made their way toward it, grateful when they finally reached the cool shadow. They sat down, breathing heavily, wiping sweat from their faces. That was when they heard voices. At first, it was just a faint sound carried by the wind. Then it grew clearer. People were talking somewhere nearby. Mara stood up at once. "We are not alone," she said quietly. Karan raised a hand, signaling everyone to stay still. He moved slowly to the edge of the trees and looked out. In the distance, a small group of travelers was moving along another path. They had animals carrying bags and supplies. They did not look angry or dangerous, but Karan did not relax. "Traders," he said after a moment, "most likely." Ina stepped closer. "Is that good or bad?" "Both," he replied. "They can offer help or they can bring trouble." The group watched as the travelers drew closer. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. They walked calmly, talking among themselves. One of the men noticed Karan and raised a hand in greeting. "We mean no harm," he called out. Karan nodded and stepped forward. "Neither do we." The travelers stopped a short distance away. The woman smiled warmly when she saw the 4 women and the boy. "That is quite a group you have," she said. "Life brings people together in strange ways," Ina replied. They spoke for a while, sharing simple news about the land ahead. The traders told them about a small settlement not far to the north, where people from many places gathered to trade and rest. Taya's heart lifted at the sound of it. A place where they might finally stop. A place where they might belong again. Before they parted, the traders offered a small bag of dried fruit in exchange for one of Karan's tools. It was a fair trade, and everyone felt a little lighter as they continued on their way. But the good feeling did not last long. As the day wore on, the sky began to darken. Thick clouds rolled in, covering the sun. The wind grew stronger, pushing against them. Nira looked up. "A storm is coming," she said. They tried to move faster, but the ground was slippery now, and their tired legs struggled. The first drops of rain fell, then more, until the sky opened up. The rain was heavy and cold. It soaked their clothes and weighed them down. The wind howled around them, making it hard to hear anything else. "Over there," Karan shouted, pointing toward a group of rocks that formed a small shelter. They ran as best they could, helping each other, making sure Liko did not fall. When they reached the rocks, they huddled together, their backs against the stone, waiting for the storm to pass. Taya shivered, her teeth chattering. Nira wrapped an arm around her, sharing what little warmth she could. Myra stood at the edge of the shelter, watching the rain fall in sheets. For the first time since they had met, her strong face showed fear. Not of the storm itself, but of what it reminded her of. How small they were in a world that could change so quickly. Ina closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer, not to any one thing, but to the hope that they would all make it through this. Liko pressed close to Karan, who placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "It will pass," he said, and it did. Slowly, the rain softened. The wind calmed. The clouds began to break apart, letting small patches of blue sky show through. They stepped out from their shelter, cold and tired, but grateful to still be standing. As the evening approached, they found a place to stop near a gentle slope overlooking a wide valley. In the distance, they could see faint signs of life, thin lines of smoke rising into the air. "That must be the settlement," Nira said. Hope filled the group. They were close now. But the final stretch of the road tested them more than any part before. Their bodies were sore. Their feet hurt. The weight of everything they had been through pressed down on them. Taya stumbled once, and Mara caught her before she fell. They looked at each other, surprised. It was the first time Mara had reached out like that. "Do not give up now," Mara said softly. "We are almost there." Taya nodded, finding new strength in those words. As night fell, they made camp one last time before reaching the settlement. The fire burned low and steady. They sat in a circle, quiet and thoughtful. Nira spoke first. "When we reach that place, what will we do?" Ina smiled. "We will rest, we will breathe, and then we will decide who we want to be next." Liko looked at Karan. "Will you stay with us?" Karan hesitated. He had never planned to stop. The road had always been his home. But now, when he looked at the faces around the fire, he felt something different. "I will see what the morning brings," he said. Taya watched the flames and thought about how much she had changed. She was no longer just someone who had lost everything. She was someone who had walked through fear, through storms, through the unknown, and kept going. Mara stared into the dark, thinking about how her anger had slowly turned into something else. A sense of belonging she had not expected. Nira held her carved piece of wood, but this time she did not cry. She felt sadness, yes, but also a quiet sense of peace. Ina looked at them all, her heart full. She had lived a long life, but she had never known a journey like this. A journey not just across land, but across hearts. The fire crackled softly as the stars filled the sky. Tomorrow, they would reach a place that could change everything. But tonight, they were still just a small group on a long road, bound together by loss, by choice, and by the simple act of walking side by side. And for the first time since the day their world had fallen apart, that felt like enough. The morning light touched the valley like a gentle hand, waking the world slowly. Mist rested low over the ground, moving softly as the air warmed. The group stood at the edge of the hill, looking down at the place they had walked so far to reach. Below them, the settlement stretched across the open land. Small homes made of wood and stone stood in loose rows. Thin trails of smoke rose from cooking fires. People moved about, carrying baskets, leading animals, talking in low, steady voices. It did not look perfect or rich, but it looked alive. It looked like a place where a person could stop running. Taya felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with something close to hope. "We made it," she whispered. Nira stood beside her, her hand resting over the small carved piece of wood she still carried. "I never thought I would see a place like this again," she said. Mara said nothing, but her eyes moved carefully over the settlement, watching for anything that felt wrong. Even now, she did not fully trust peace. Ina closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. The air smelled different here. It smelled like food cooking, like animals, like people living close together. It smelled like life moving forward. Liko bounced on his feet. "Can we go now?" he asked, excitement shining in his eyes. Karan nodded. Yes, let's go. They walked down the hill together, their steps slow but steady. As they drew closer, a few people noticed them and stopped to watch. There was no anger in their faces, only curiosity. A man stepped forward, tall and broad, with lines on his face that showed years of work under the sun. Travelers? He asked. Yes, Karan replied. The man looked at the women and the boy. You've come a long way. We have, Ina said. He nodded. You are welcome to rest here. There is a place near the edge of the settlement where travelers often stay. Relief washed over the group. They thanked him and followed the path he pointed out. They found a small open space near a group of trees. The shade felt good after so many days in the open land. They set their things down, and for the first time in a long while, no one felt the need to hurry. People passed by, some offering small smiles, others nodding in quiet greeting. A woman came over with a basket of bread and placed it near them without saying a word. Taya's eyes filled with tears at the simple kindness. They sat together and ate slowly, enjoying every bite. The food tasted better than anything they could remember, not just because they were hungry, but because it felt like a gift. Liko ran off to watch other children playing near a water well. His laughter floated back to them, light and free. Myra watched him go, then looked at Karan. You brought us here, she said. You could have left us days ago. He shrugged. You kept walking, so did I. Neera smiled at that. As the day went on, they explored the settlement. There were small trading areas where people exchanged goods. There were open spaces where animals rested. There were quiet corners where older people sat and talked in the shade. Taya found herself standing near a group of women who were weaving cloth. They looked up and smiled, and one of them showed her how to work the threads. Her hands moved slowly at first, but soon she found a rhythm. It felt good to do something simple, something that did not involve fear or loss. Neera helped an older man carry water from the well. He thanked her with a warm smile and told her stories about how the settlement had grown from just a few homes into what it was now. Listening to him, she began to feel like this place had a past and a future she could be part of. Mara wandered near the outer edge, watching the land beyond the settlement. For the first time, she did not feel the need to keep moving. She sat down on a low wall and let the sun warm her face. Ina sat under a tree, talking with a group of elders. They shared stories of where they had come from, of people they had lost, of roads they had walked. Ina felt understood in a way she had not felt in a long time. Karan stood apart, leaning against a post, watching all of them. He saw the way Taya laughed softly as she worked. He saw Neera's calm face as she listened to the older man. He saw Myra's shoulders relax as she sat in the sun. He saw Ina's gentle smile as she spoke with the elders. Something shifted inside him. As evening came, the sky turned warm with color. Fires were lit, and the smell of cooking filled the air. The group gathered back at their small space under the trees. Liko ran up to them, breathless. They said I can help feed the animals tomorrow, he said proudly. Ina laughed. That is wonderful. They sat together in a circle, watching the settlement settle into night. Neera spoke quietly. What happens now? Taya thought about it. Now we live, Mara nodded slowly. Now we choose who we want to be. Ina looked at Karan. And you? He was silent for a moment. The road had always been his answer. The next place, the next horizon. But now he felt tired in a way he had not noticed before. Not just in his body, but in his heart. I think, he said slowly, I will stay for a while. Liko cheered softly. Taya smiled. Neera let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Even Mara's face softened. The days that followed were simple but full. Taya continued to work with the women, learning to weave and sew. She found comfort in creating something new, something that did not carry the weight of her past. Neera began helping at the well and in the small trading area. She discovered that she was good at talking to people, at finding fair trades, at making others feel heard. Mara started working with a group that kept watch around the settlement. She found a place where her sharp eyes and strong will were valued, where she could protect instead of just fear. Ina spent her time with the elders and the children, telling stories, listening to others, becoming a bridge between the old and the new. Karan helped where he could, fixing fences, guiding travelers who came through, sharing his knowledge of the roads. For the first time, he felt like he was building something instead of just passing through. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in soft colors, the group sat together again. Taya looked around at them. We lost so much, she said, But somehow we found each other, Nira nodded, and we found a place to stand. Mara added, a place to fight for if we have to, Ina smiled. A place to grow. Karan watched the fire, then looked at all of them. You changed my road, he said simply. Liko leaned against Ina, already half asleep. I like this road, he mumbled. They laughed quietly. The stars came out bright and steady above them. The world was still wide and uncertain. There would still be hard days. There would still be moments of fear and loss. But now they were not facing it alone. They were no longer just people who had been carried by the road. They were people who had chosen to stop, to build, to belong. And in that choice, they had found something stronger than anything they had lost. They had found a new beginning.